Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're back live again. We were having some technical difficulties, but we are going to still round out the show here with what we do still have. And I want to dive into at least some initial thoughts here on the NBA Summer League. Again, I understand that this is something that goes over just about a lot of people's heads in terms of their actual interest level in the Summer League. So we won't, talk your ear off about it all summer long, but it is something that is pretty interesting to me. And last night, I thought we actually got, an awesome experience in the game that we saw between the Memphis Grizzlies and the Utah Jazz. And those aren't necessarily franchises that jump off the page in terms of level of excitements, but I still thought it was very interesting because you look at the starting fives for both of these teams, plus some of the first players off of the bench, and these are legitimately players we're going to see get real minutes this season. For the Grizzlies, former first-round pick Jake LaRavia, Gigi Jackson, who was just on an all-rookie team last year, Zach Edey, who they just took in the first round this year, Jalen Wells, who was their draft pick for them this year as well, and Scottie Pippen Jr., who got playing time for them last year. At least, keep in mind they were dealing with a lot of injuries, but even still. And then there was also Cam Spencer, the UConn guard, who was a very big part of their national championship run, who I thought looked really good last night too, and somebody that I've definitely had stock in. So you got a number of prospects there. And then for the Jazz, 10th overall pick Cody Williams, Taylor Hendricks, who was a top 10 pick for them last year, Walker Kessler, who I was shocked was actually playing this game. He was drafted 2 years ago now in the first round, was all rookie and is a pretty established player, and we'll get into him very shortly here as well. Bryce Sensabaugh, first round pick a couple years ago, and Keontae George, who was all rookie last season as well. Plus, they have a couple other draft picks that they took this year, and Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski that both played as well. So, ended up being a very good game, went to overtime, and I tuned in because I was just fascinated about the idea of Zach Edey and what does he look like on an NBA floor. And ultimately, he looked pretty good. Now, keep in mind, obviously, lesser level of competition that you have to factor in here, but 14 points, 15 rebounds, 4 blocks, and ended up having just one of the most physically dominant plays you'll see. And keep in mind, again, a level below, but this is still professional basketball. And the fact that he was able to go up in his first ever NBA action against Walker Kessler, who is a very, very talented defensive big, and also Kyle Filipowski, was a really good experience for him. He actually had a chance at a putback dunk with, about 5-10 seconds left that didn't go, and it seemed like that was going to be the opportunity that got out of hand for him. I was feeling really bad for him. But then series of events here where the Jazz shot some free throws. They then intentionally fouled while up by 3, which is something that, especially in the playoffs this past year, we heard so many people screaming about. You have to always do this. And there was, of course, the Tyrese Maxey play in that series against the 76ers. And Edey, he bull rushed Walker Kessler, who was boxing him out. Kyle Filipowski was trying to get a hand on him as well to slow him down. And Edey just barreled his way to the basket off the release. The Grizzlies intentionally missed the free throw, and then Edey was able to get the putback. And it was a crazy moment. And I do think that, if you want to look big picture with Edey here, there were moments in this game that you could come away feeling like there is going to be a mismatch issue there. He was put in a good amount of defensive action in the pick and rolls and getting caught in middle ground that, when you're talking about the Jazz's summer league team, they weren't necessarily able to punish the Grizzlies and Edey in that same way, and that's something that is going to be an issue for Edey. But go to that tip-in that he had at the end of the game, he's massive and he's very much talented. You saw him able to take Walker Kessler in the post with, his drop steps and hook shots, and, they're not things that you're going to be building an offense around by any means, but he's doing this against a legitimate 7-footer in the league. Talk about if Edey ends up getting, mismatches, he's going to be able to make NBA players pay for it. And I thought he really well demonstrated that last night when he was facing off against, again, some legitimate big men who are going to get minutes in the NBA next season. So all in all, this was a very entertaining game. Like I mentioned, though, I was surprised to see that Walker Kessler was actually getting minutes in this game. And I was texting with a friend of mine about this Edey performance because he's not really a believer in him. And he said that his biggest surprise was that Kessler was playing in this game as well. And then almost immediately after, I got a notification from Bleacher Report that the Jazz are reportedly shopping Kessler and looking for a potential first-round pick. So this feels like a move for them where they are actually trying to showcase him a little bit and maybe doing it against a little bit worse competition in the Summer League. But still a very interesting, factor here that, because it's not often, I feel like, that we see third-year players, especially ones that have shown that they're more than capable of playing NBA minutes in the Summer League. And I'm always for, I said this, a couple days ago, that I'm always for giving players, extra experience and actual game action. But caught me off guard. But, the Knicks are a team that are potentially interested in him. So, something to think about if you are just sort of bored on these summer nights without football or basketball. I mean, Walker Kessler is a potential option that could be on the move. You also look at the New Orleans Pelicans, who are in need of a center. That's probably a pretty low-cost player for the Pelicans, who need to bring somebody in. Right now, Yves Missi, their first-round pick from this past year, is the only option that they have in terms of bigs right now. Losing Valanciunas in free agency and then trading Larry Nance in that deal with the Atlanta Hawks, that, just something to keep an eye on. But again, ultimately, the results of this game in particular, again, nobody's going to be thinking about this probably a week from now, but I thought it was really interesting to see. And some other, various thoughts. I'll also give the fact that Ousmane Dieng for the Oklahoma City Thunder, he was the pick right before Jalen Williams in the 2022 draft, and he actually looked pretty decent as well. But to wrap this all up, because again, don't want to go too long here on the Summer League, is just some brief Lakers thoughts on Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. Bronny, there's really not much to talk about there. He was 2 of 9 from the field. I mentioned this before. He was getting himself open, which is something that, as an on-ball player, considering his size especially, he is going to have to be able to actually beat players off the dribble if he's ever really going to be all that impactful, I would think, at least. Now, we see some short players carve out roles for themselves without being, primary creators themselves, but definitely a lot to work on there for Bronny, but some encouraging things there. And then Dalton Knecht, not a super impressive offensive game either, but at least for him, I think that he's held up pretty well on defense so far, which is definitely going to be a significant part of the conversation as to whether or not he actually gets minutes for the Lakers this year, because that was one of his bigger concerns as he was heading into Tennessee last season, and it got better throughout the course of the year under Rick Barnes as a head coach. And now we are going to, I think, see him, buying in even more on that defensive side where he's not asked to do as much offensively. So I'd say, generally speaking, a little bit of positive notes there. But we are going to be diving into our last segment of the day here. Gotta wrap this thing up before the baseball show starts up, but I just want to run through some of the top prospects that will be in college basketball for the 2025 season that I'm looking forward to seeing the most. So we're going to be diving into all of that. Stick with us. We will be right back after this quick break.